It's good. We'd like to welcome all of you. My name's Martyna Żądło. There's Maria next to me and also Katarzyna. And today we will speak about designing research using the service design methodology. Now, what do we do? Maria and myself, we work for Sociomania. Maria is responsible for innovation, I'm responsible for marketing. And there's also Kasia, who's responsible for the customer as part of our team. And now, before we move on to how actually design a research, well, we believe that our case study is quite interesting because we're talking about an NGO that used our project. Okay, you can hear us well. That's good. Now, before we speak about this particular research, let me introduce you to Donateo. Donateo is quite a unique project because on the one hand, we work for NGOs. This is the third sector. It is on their behalf that we develop fundraising tools to win funds for charity. And the other part of this is that we are involved in business. And now we are involved in micro-donation. And we actually need to tell you what that is because we've done a research and it turned out that 90% of people didn't know what micro-donation actually was. Now, so what a micro-donation is, it's a very small donation for a charity organization. And how can you actually calculate it? Well, this year the value of micro-donation is calculated between 1 to 5 Polish zlotys. So usually you round up the bill that you get for your shopping, or it can be a percentage of the basket value or a fixed amount of money. So what's this flow of micro-donation? So first there's the question whether you want to help people in need. Then the customer says yes, and then this micro-donation is sent directly to the account of a given organization. So what is characteristic about this project is that this micro-donation goes directly to an organization's account. So that's quite innovative about Donateo. So if we know what micro-donation is, and I'm sure that many of you have heard about it for the first time. So the main problem was that we had to find out what consumers knew about this brand new service, because, given this micro-donation, when doing your shopping was something really innovative. So who are the stakeholders here? Well, people who are to give the donations, but on the other hand, we had retail shops that were allow us to enter shops and make it possible for people to give these micro donations to different organizations. So we had to use the terminals for payment. So we had to convince the stakeholders that that was the service that they really needed. And now, what were the challenges when it came to the research design? So it was necessary to test a big sample of customers. We also had to present to the respondents the very product and service. We also had to design the research from the point of view of the consumer, the customer, but also from the point of view of the potential retail partner. And we also had to present it in an attractive way to the partners. Now, the process has been designed in the following way. So first we had this kick-off meeting, then we designed the script of the interviews, then we had to organize this pilot quality test, then we had to recruit the respondents, then have a quality test or quality research, then we had to synthesize and analyze the results, and then discuss the report with the customer. And we wanted to have or design the quantitative research, but we didn't do it because there was no budget for it. That's why we started from the qualitative research. We just wanted to convince the stakeholders that the product made sense, that the service made sense. So we went against this general trend that first you start with the quantity and only then you move on to the quality. So focusing on this final customer or end user became, in a way, secondary. So to sum up, it is extremely important that you get adapted to the business. So we didn't create a research only to prove something, but actually to achieve our goals. Okay, so since we know what micro-donations are, let's talk about service design now, because this is the main topic of our speech today. And why should you why should you actually use service design in research design? So what is service design? It's a kind of methodology that focuses on designing new services, but also optimizing and enhancing the ones that are already there. So we use design thinking, and we go through such stages as empathizing, defining problems, generating ideas, building prototypes, and testing. And then we are human-centered, so we focus on people, you know, what their needs are, what their problems are. And we design the services in a way that the users get the best experience possible. And now we can this project thinking gets involved, and because we have this stage of empathizing, we can fully understand the needs of our respondents and well define our project challenges. That happened when we had our kick-off meeting with the customer. We wanted to show to our customer how people actually perceived this micro-donation service.
And we had a problem with that. We learned about the second task that Martina mentioned, namely that our study is to provide arguments to retail partners, why and how this solution can influence the entire purchasing process, and not only the donateur. The context was therefore far more extensive because it went beyond just working with the device. If you were in a hurry, this could, for example, influence, together with the other impact that you had at the terminal, that could make an impact on the final experience connected to the purchase. In this way, we could verify what question to ask in the study, and going to this scenario, at the following stage, we learn whether the questions we ask to respondents are understandable. We can test the product, or we can test the study. We can verify the study on a small number of people, whether they understand the questions. We check whether the individual, for example, perhaps fails to understand the questions, or that some things may be misformulated. The conclusions from the pilot stage let us work and adjust these things to the users. The third value that we decided to implement was co-creation. It's very important in designing services, as we closely ask questions to users about the opportunities of improving a specific service. While designing the scenario, we also did it. We gave the respondents space to be able to say how they see this service, where they see the field, the area to develop it. Now, users often open in this area, and sometimes their proposals may be crazy and difficult to implement, but that stage is important because it tells us what those people expect. We can later also interpret those ideas, how to make things easier, to adjust them as well as possible to our businesses and make them most easily implementable. What were the lessons learned in that? We learned that we have clients who are not only those who stay at the terminal, we also have business clients. We iterated it to see to what degree this service is understandable, and we made it possible for the people to participate in this more extensive process of co-creation of our product. Now, where did our action finish? Well, that we learned that after this report, we made it possible for Donatio to enter two large networks, Carrefour and Auchan. What we couldn't do in the budget was done in those two networks at the last iteration of the project and the first of the product. Now, the general challenges that resulted from the study and how they were managed at the first iteration. At the beginning, we were aware that there is a collection. They were afraid who would receive the money, who would not, that they wouldn't be able to verify the charitable organizations, and that may be inconsistent with their convictions. To us, this 0 point in time, the 0 moment of truth, is when the client encounters the terminal, when the client comes up to the terminal, and then they must have in their mind whether they want to share those micro donations or not. So 70% of communication before this moment 0, 20% during, and 10% after. Now I will be telling you step by step why. The purpose of the collection is of absolute key importance, because if you don't know what you use this money for, you won't identify with the people in need, and we're not going to make any impact on their emotions, and then the idea is gone. In online and offline, we tried to explain what the goal is behind a given campaign. And in the case of Polish Humanitarian Action, that was helping children and adults from Ukraine, when that still had a lot of impact. Now it's ending. In Food Bank, that's saving food from loss from getting spoiled. There are many ways of stimulating clients. We involved whole networks, whole chains, because they have the know-how how to do things. There are certain fundraising principles, and they know them best. We are not reinventing the circle, but that result of a study proved absolutely of key importance. We also were curious to know how what the continued life of a donation is. When we clear last year's income tax papers, the respondents were interested to know what happened to their money. They were keen to know that at many levels. There were those individual campaigns that they ran, but also on a larger scale. They wanted to know what happened to their money. And here we also have the authority of the organization to fall back on, because that organization can prove how the money was spent. Also, we present those reports in various forms, and we regularly thank clients for supporting our organization. There are screens, there are company radios, and these forms of online communication. So the client knows that their money was not burnt, that it was spent the way that it was originally intended. Surprise. Now, we had a problem verified that the respondents were afraid that, all right, we approach the point of sale, there's this terminal, some extra information that wasn't intuitive for them, they didn't expect it, and they believed that the whole campaign could be not received properly. All right, those steps were taken. 70% of communication before serves the suppression of that unpleasant moment when I'm queuing and I know that I've got to pay quickly, I'm in a hurry to go home. And that's when the client is supposed to know that they help and know what the purpose of their donation is. So there is this flow chart alerting the client to take the decision. If prior to that they were in a hurry, in the transaction flow and in the communication and in the proportion of this communication to the zero moment, we make sure that the client is not shocked, and we trying to make this process of payment easy, pleasant, so that you don't lose time, so that there is no unpleasant decision hard to make. And that is strictly connected to the following elements in this study. The first is readability of the information. We all know what the terminal is. People are afraid that the screen is small, we won't see anything, especially respondents 75 plus say this screen is too small to make any decision. Yes, that's right. So we made what we believe to be an ideal flow, which met our assumptions and results of the study. In the ideal version, when we have better technologies for the terminals, the flow is perfect, everything works fine, but sometimes, as in Carrefour, we have old generation terminals, and that flow isn't that perfect here. So we also use this information next to the terminals, those labels with the green button yes, so that it's easier for the client to decide, so that the client doesn't feel that they are cheated because the flow isn't fully readable. There were those voices saying that this flow, the whole transaction was camouflaged in this whole process. And in this case, we add additional information here so that the client is not disoriented. Another thing we had here is directly connected to the fact that we try to make easy purchases. And there are also people who declared they want to complete this payment as quickly as possible. Also, they said that this stage extends their purchasing process, and in some retail networks that was not fully intuitive, and they simply wanted to click through different things. So in practice, the flow was such that all the client was supposed to do was to confirm that they want to share a micro donation. We intended not to make client furious additionally. So at the 0 point in time, the client already knew whether they want it or not, and they knew that there is no loss of time in it. And the labels on the terminals also pointed to what the client was supposed to do if the clients had any doubts at all. The following element, which is very important to us, was minimum contact with the terminal, something we really focused on. And this means that people only look at the terminal when they had to enter PIN. And smartphones and smartwatches are also used in the younger generation, and these people don't look at the terminal. That was also a major research challenge, because suddenly we enforced this interaction with the terminal, which is not really usual for them. Interestingly, in the beginning we had very high conversion. I can't say what. I wouldn't like to disclose that. And people looking at it were waiting for red, and money was charged from the card. So there were then different complaints. That was positive, but also there were some negative comments. There was quite a lot of fuss with it. In the beginning, we were opening our champagne because we said, oh, Poles are so great, you need no communication. But it turned out that there was lack of understanding, and we just communicated clearly to the client that you know what the purpose is, and that this green button determines. If you press it, it means that you're sharing the money. So we readdress the client's attention to the terminal at the point of sale. So this results in informed, conscious decision, and then the percentage of complaints dropped. Now, the preferred amount of micro donation, that was very important for us. We didn't know whether it's supposed to be the same money, 1 to 5 or rounding up to 5. And that question turned up in the study, in the qualitative group. We only had around 50 respondents, but after the first iteration, it turned out that this was absolutely spot on. It's really shocking. Now in Carrefour, we have full 2 zloty of micro donation, and it doesn't work as well as rounding up to a full amount. We thought that people would have to calculate, okay, if I round it up, well, what is it going to be? And that they would be irritated that they've got to calculate it in their mind. But it turned out that it is far more efficient, because to people it doesn't make a difference between 2 to 50 and 3. So that was the most efficient way of adding this microdonation, why service design was worthwhile. These are main bullets that we wanted to show in this study, combining those research competences with designing competences. We could design such a qualitative design that made it possible to find those most important points and introduce solutions to the main problems. Now, Kasia is going to help us with this. We have no moment when people move out from that campaign. There is no withdrawal after this first step, that clients step out. This can still develop business-wise. Yes, at the moment, business goes like that. It's also important for the NGOs that were the beneficiaries of the first two rounds. These continue, and in Carrefour and Auchan, we collected millions zloty in 2 months. Clients were really generous and open. There were quite a few moments of crisis, and we reacted to those with appropriate communication, because there were some shortcomings that turned up in practice. The subject of the qualitative study that we never made comes up to the fore here. Well, we never did, and we know what the results are. Well, we always examine it for the effect for the NGOs, and food banks could save 1.5 tons of food, which was for us a measurable success in terms of fundraising. Now, Polish Humanitarian Action can prepare 2,000 packages of hygiene and food in 2 months, and that's most important for us. And this campaign is going to continue, and we're going to go on with that. We generally are now geared for the development of the system of microdonations in Poland, and positioning it as something that's not campaign-based, but continuous, to gear those people for support of NGOs, this regular support with microdonations. Now, there's this context that we didn't mention at the beginning, and it's very important. Clearing tax is changing, and the 1% that we have deduced from our tax may be now not very important, and it's been smaller because of changes in the tax system. Microdonations let us fill in the gap that foundations feel, and it will let us support those NGOs regularly with amounts that we won't feel. There were also those respondents who calculated how much they pay to charities, once a month 3 zloty, but they were a vast majority. What have we learned? What are the lessons learned? And I will let myself start. I learned that defining my business goals and thinking differently about it, designing services. We designed service as a report from that study for retail. And here we have this human centricity that we usually forget, that there is a human being in a business client. They have their fears, their convictions, and mapping our research problems, we got those that Kasia shared from our first meetings with retail, people who were sure that microdonations won't work, that this would break the purchasing process, and that people are furious. Yes, people are furious when doing shopping in shops, but they are furious for many other things. We had to change the focus, realize that there is the human on the business side, and focus on that human. I'd say that a very important experience for me, something I'd like to learn more, is that we often run studies in groups. Every one of us has different competences, convictions, and we pay attention to different aspects. In a research team, we may have some variability because we would pay attention to different considerations. So, questions must be asked always in the same manner, and there must be also hints telling us what to do, what to pay attention to, because that is something that really helps the study to be positive, to give information. I very quickly learned how to build roadmaps for implementations, and that saved a lot of my time and nerves. I learned what steps to take to make efficient implementations. On the road, there were also some delicate problems that we couldn't really foresee. And now I know for future that implementation of a new product, even if it is charity, it must follow studies, because without them we lose plenty of time and we would have some preconceptions that could lead us to nowhere or astray. That subject, the app you've just seen, is also now being tested in e-commerce. So conclusions from that study will also serve us there. We also have reporting informing about the later history of a campaign. These are also important elements to share, to communicate. Wrapping up, why is it worthwhile? First, we learn, and secondly, this made it possible for us to create a product that works and has a realistic opportunity to help people. Our purpose was really noble, and it's really easier to design things when you know that you realistically help people. And the use of that method in our daily routines has become a part of our life. Maria and I can definitely say it. This is certainly something we implementing in our organization for good. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation, and I am convinced that there are some questions from the floor. Are there any? Hand up, please.
You mentioned that there was this risk concerning the terminals, that they could be a bit old and that they wouldn't present the communications well. So my question is whether there was any risk that you're the most afraid of right before launching the product on the market. Maybe there was something that you wouldn't have influence on, and that would actually have had a great impact on the success of the project. Well, our concern was that people would feel stimulated to donate money for charity, but in 2 months' time, that would be over. So we started our study before the situation was really dramatic, and we ended it when people had a totally different look on charity campaigns. So I was concerned that our results were a bit distorted. I was really worried what would happen after 2 months, once people got a bit bored with, giving money to charities, to put it bluntly. Yes, we did this quantitative study, and I was afraid that we would wrongly understand or wrongly create this implementation strategy. That was my concern. Well, we were a bit afraid of how certain clients would react. You have to be very careful when you approach them, especially when it comes to retail clients, because there are concerns that money is taken from your card and so on. So we need to focus on transparency, on the fact that we have to make sure that this is the client's decision. So yes, we had some results, but we haven't noticed certain aspects that occurred once we launched the product. So there was this concern that maybe retail would be against our service because their PR agencies would have to, explain what has happened and that we are only the provider of the technology. So we were the coordinators here, just connecting the dots, and we had to talk to the Department of Communication and CSR of the retail companies. Okay, you said that retail people were concerned, and the question is, okay, so if the retail people were concerned that the whole purchasing process would be irritable for people, what actually convinced them to your service? So there are companies that are that constantly have CSR campaigns, and we provide technology only, and it's for free. So retail gets this app practically for free. We look after it when it comes to technology. We maintain it. We make sure that the whole transaction flow happens smoothly and does not affect their terminals and the payment technology. So PR, that's another issue, because these are things that you can have in your sustainable development reports. And there's one more thing that I haven't mentioned before. We get cashiers involved in providing information on the campaign. Well, they don't have time to do that. They have their own KPIs, but in the future, we're going to ask them to get their organizations committed. Okay, there are more questions from the audience. Okay, I must admit that I read your presentation as an explanation of why you have created a product which initially was received quite negatively, and well, you're explaining us why in the end you've decided to go on with it. But I haven't received an answer to this question. I must say that I've seen your service there. I could give this micro donation through a terminal, and I'm one of those users who doesn't really like it. Yes, it makes me doing shopping longer. And I've never seen any information on where this money goes, who uses it, what's happening to it. So what does it look like from your perspective? Why did you decide to create Donatio against the results of your study? Well, let's start with by saying that this wasn't the result. We just had our concerns. This flow seemed to be too long, so we shortened it. And this will, for micro donations, it was there. So this was the result of our study too. We knew that it was there, but we just need to optimize the service and change it. And let me give the floor to Kasia now. Okay, let me start from saying that we can never satisfy everyone. So we've tried to reach some optimum between the terminals, because there's some pixels involved. Then we need to get it adapted to the flow. Then we also have to separate this micro donation from the main payment. And you know what shops look like. You know, they sell everything, and it's hard to find your ways there. So maybe you got irritated because you were not identified with that, or maybe you didn't receive any information on the goal of the money collection. Maybe that was badly communicated. Maybe there were some other issues involved. But conversion shows us that not everybody wants to pay the micro donation, right? But we address our service to those who do contactless payments and who wish to support certain charity organizations. Okay, so for example, I can give money for children, but not necessarily for food to be recycled, right? Because I believe that this can be done differently. This is just an example. Now, there will always be customers that won't be happy with a given solution. We've tried to do it in the most optimum way possible, but we keep testing the service and we keep improving it. Okay, we have time left for just one last question. It was a very interesting presentation and a very interesting product, I must say. As a user of Carrefour, I must say that very often cashiers, before they even give the customer the terminal, they click no. So have you did your survey on cashiers too? No, in the study cashiers were not included, but yes, people told us about them too. Now, over 70% of people, if they can, they actually avoid doing shopping through cashiers, but they use
kasjerów, dlatego że badanie dotyczyło tak naprawdę głównie tych klientów, ale warto o nich wspomnieć.
POS
officers. To jest bardzo ciężki temat.
Now, yes, this is a difficult issue, and yes, some cashiers, they actually click the red button before they even give the terminal to the customer. So that's why we've launched this program for them, just to win them over. So we had to, put the shoes of the customers, but also of the cashiers. We did audits and we asked them why they were doing it. We tried to, sense the situation. And the problem is that they actually have their KPIs. They need to have a given number of transactions a day to get a bonus. All right? So, telling the customer why they have to press a given button or another is just a pain in the neck for them. So we've run some tests and we already know that, words of thank to a given cashier, makes them feel slightly embarrassed. So, if they pressed the red button before and then they got thanks from us, next time they wouldn't be so ready to press the red button. And we also have to educate the customers